much of your life would change if you just stopped overcomplicating your finances?
If you missed part one, where we broke down the first 4 universal laws and how they apply to your money, pause this video, go watch it, and then come back. Trust us, it's worth it.
Part two, we are diving even deeper into 4 more laws. This time we're tackling simplicity, balance, and how every financial action has an equal reaction.
Exactly. These aren't just abstract physical ideas. They're practical tools that can help you build wealth without all the chaos or overwhelm.
So if you ever felt like you're working harder and harder, but not getting as far ahead, this episode today is the one for you.
Let's kick it off with the principle of least action, because sometimes doing less is actually the smartest move you can make. This is the Fi Guys. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Fi Guys podcast, the show where we dive deep into the world of financial independence and personal finance. Whether you're just starting out on your journey or well on your way to financial freedom, we've got the insights and strategies you need to achieve your financial goals.
In each episode, we'll provide actionable tips and real-life success stories to inspire and guide you on your path to financial independence. So, grab your notepad and get ready to transform your financial future with the Fi Guys podcast. Let's get started. The Fi Guys is a podcast dedicated to providing general information and insights on a wide range of wealth-related topics. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not constitute personalized financial advice.
The content provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It should not be considered a substitute for professional financial advice. Your financial situation and goals are unique, and the information provided here may not be applicable or suitable for your specific circumstances.
We, the host and the guests of the Fi Guys, are not acting as your financial advisor. We are not aware of your individual financial situations, risk tolerance, or investment objectives. Any decisions or actions you take based on the information provided on this podcast are your own and made at your own risk. I may be a financial advisor, but I am not your financial advisor. And now that the lawyers are happy, let's get started.
So, Dominic, today in part 2 of the physics of finance, I said that we're going to only talk about 4 different laws of the universe that apply to our money. But as I was thinking about it, from creating our show notes, I actually came up with 2 additional ones that I want to go over. So if our listeners heard from last week which ones we'd be talking about this week, maybe they'll be able to point out which 2 weren't originally on the list.
A little bit of a pop quiz for the listener. I like that, keeping them on their toes. That's good, and I'm excited. Yeah, last week was very informational, very actionable, and very interesting. I highly recommend, if not going back and watching Monday's episode, the full podcast, you can listen to Friday's episode where we recapped what we went over. Very interesting, though. Very interesting, and I'm excited to dive deep. I'm glad we do a part 2 because, gotta be honest, a lot of it took a lot to soak in, and I can only take in so much at one time. So I'm excited for today's episode.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to go ahead and open up with the quote that we used on last one by Miyoda Musashi, the samurai who wrote the Book of the 5 Rings. He who knows the way broadly sees it in all things. Now, I'm not saying that I know the way broadly in any way, shape, or form, but it is fun when you find these laws or immutable natural principles that seem to go across all boundaries. So when I find these things, especially in physics or in religion or in philosophy that apply to money, I always think it's fun to bring to our audience like, hey, look, there's a relation here between these 2 things. If it's true here and it's true here, maybe it's true in general. Because the way we define truth, or at least I define truth, is what works across time, across discipline, and across individuals. So what works indefinitely is probably truth.
100%. 100%. And I don't want to recap too much on Monday's episode, but I do want to at least say the ones we have already gone over. You want to start it off? You want me to start it off? Or
You got them all.
All righty. So we've got the law of conservation of energy. And I don't know if we should go too deep on the definitions. Maybe a quick, I'll read them out. You want to give a quick definition on it?
Sure. So the first one was law of conservation of energy.
Yep.
Yeah, so that one is energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. And I would say if people want more than that, go and listen to Monday's or Friday's pod.
There you go. Number 2 was the law of entropy.
Good.
What
Entropy.
that one?
Yeah. Entropy or disorder always increases over time in a closed loop system. So we as humans try to bring order to the world, or to the universe, but the universe is naturally chaotic. So it's constantly trying to move back to chaos. So it takes work in order to happen or avoid that from happening.
Yeah, 100%. It's like society. We're a chaotic bunch over here. Number 3, you guys might already understand it, might have watched a movie on it, maybe you know a little bit about it, but it is the butterfly effect.
Yeah. Thanks to our boy Ashton Kutcher for telling us what this all means. But what it means is small, seemingly insignificant changes in a system can lead to large and often unpredictable outcomes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the 4th and final one from last week's episode was feedback loops, if I'm not mistaken.
You're exactly right. And this is both a physical phenomenon and a biological phenomenon, but feedback loops can be both positive and negative. So a positive feedback loop amplifies changes, makes changes happen faster, where negative feedback loops counter changes.
I feel like when I hear that one, I think of like the most successful people in the world, and they have positive feedback loops, but they also have feedback loops that are honest and truthful. And I think that's something that all of us really need in this world is a very honest feedback loop.
I would agree with that. It's easier when you set it up for yourself, that you know that what you're doing is honest, that you know that you're following the right path for yourself. Everything else seems to fall in line, at least for me, in the way that I kind of think of things and conceive of them. So what I'd like to do is move on to number 5. We have 6 to get through today. Number 5 is the principle of least action. This is a physical concept which says that systems tend to follow the path that requires the least action or energy to achieve a particular result. And just to give you an application to finance, is optimal financial strategies are often the simplest and most effective. Rather than complex financial maneuvers, a straightforward, consistent strategy tend to yield the best long-term results.
Okay. So the lazy man's approach to success, in a way.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? Because in finance is one of the few places that less action actually gets better results. Like sometimes the best financial strategies are often the simplest ones. And they just, because they avoid the unnecessary complexity and focus on the consistent, efficient actions to get you the results that you want, rather than the inefficient, inconsistent actions that most people believe that they're going to do. Because the perfect plan means literally nothing if you can't execute on it. And if you, when I say that, people are like, oh yeah, but Chris, I'm always going to execute on it. But if you look at this law of least action, then you realize like, oh wait, there's actually a physical law of the universe that is working against me.
It's true. It really is true. And human nature gives the great example of it. I mean, everybody has a million examples of how this is accurate and this is true. And maybe in a way we can not just equate this to finance, but in every other aspect of our life as well. You know, oftentimes we overcomplicate things and get in this analysis paralysis mode where, you know, we just, I need to learn more before I can start. And it's fear. It's fear because the perfect plan doesn't exist. The perfect plan is starting now and figuring it out along the way. So it's scary. We know it's scary. We definitely know it's scary. It's not something easily executed, but it is easily said. But we hope that, you know, you take those actions.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is we have to realize that perfection is an illusion and that trying to seek perfection, you're never going to get there. So what we have to do is we have to punch fear in the face and you have to get started. Because if you're waiting to get started till you have the perfect plan, again, if perfection is not real, you're never going to actually get started. So the only way that we can know what the path was to look back and say like, oh, that was the path. But you can't know that path until you start. So an example of the principle of least action might be automating your savings or investments so that money flows out of your accounts with minimal effort. Or using passive investment strategies that require little to zero time to manage. I think it's a lot more difficult when people say, oh, don't worry. Once you get my paycheck in, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take $400 out of that. I'm going to move that to this investment account. I'm going to do all this stuff. Well, all the modern day custodians, you can set up automatic things. That's the reason that 401ks work so well. It gets our dumb brains out of it. Before I even get the paycheck to be able to do whatever I want with it, that 401k money has already been taken out. Same with my benefits, same with taxes. All of those things have been taken out before I have the chance to mess it up. And you can do the same thing if you want to have an additional account outside of maybe a work sponsored plan like a 401k, 403b, 527, TSP, whatever it is, by setting that up with your custodian, whether that be Schwab, M1 Finance, Vanguard, Fidelity. You can set up those accounts to come out every 2 weeks. You can set it up to be on the exact same day that your paycheck comes in. So that way, before the money might hit your account, maybe you made $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 in your account, but you'll also see another line item of $500, $100, $1,000 being transferred over to your custodian. And then that money, ideally, you've additionally already set up for it to be automatically invested into whatever things. Because wherever we put in action into the system, that's a place for chaos to come in. That's a place for it to fall apart.
Yeah. So simplicity is key for building a strong future. And really, and to be honest, simplicity is key to go faster as well, right?
Okay. Yeah. It'd be like if I had to run if I had to go and run a mile, if I just go out there and don't think about it and I just run the way that my body knows how to run, I'll be able to make a mile. But if I sit there and I start to conceive of, oh, is my foot hitting in the right place? Is my pacing on? And I'm sitting there overthinking it. Well, now running becomes this like really, really difficult thing to do because you're taking an unconscious process and you're trying to make it conscious. In sports, it's called the yips, where someone gets in their own head and they're thinking through all the processes. It's just like the baseball player who's a perfect pitcher. And then all of a sudden he just starts tagging everybody out and he just loses everything. The batter who's able to hit, the quarterback who just all of a sudden can't throw. They're taking unconscious processes and they're trying to make it conscious again. And they're making it more complicated than it needs to be. Not to say that it's not complicated, but you already knew how to do it. And when you're trying to now consciously do it, you no longer can because they're two different systems of your brain, two different systems of your body.
Mm-hmm. So the best way to do it is just do it once, get it out of the way so that you can just focus on the things that you actually enjoy in life. That's kind of like the idea of it.
It depends. Yeah. I mean, that's one of those, I mean, do it once if you're going to do it right. But, I think the big thing is just do it. I think Nike has some truth there and just do it. Not in all things, but in most. I'd like to move on to principle number 6. And this one's going to sound very familiar to the last one, but I do promise you it is slightly different. But it's such an important concept that I want to bring it again. So in case saying the principle of least action sounds weird, actually, Chris, I'm pretty sure it's called the principle of least resistance, which is actually an engineering term. So engineering is the one that says the principle or the path of least resistance. And that says that systems tend to follow a path of least resistance in order to reach equilibrium. So in finance, financial decisions could aim for simplicity and ease. Complex financial strategies or consistently trying to optimize everything can create more friction than necessary. So again, this is very similar to the principle of least action, but I think people saying like, oh, process of least resistance, the principle of least resistance might make it a bit easier when they realize I'm overcomplicating the system. The issue in the system is not the system. The issue in the system is me.
And do you find that it usually is the person, it's not the system?
Yes and no. It depends on where they get the system from. If the system is a sound system, then yes, it's the person. But if the system is some pulled together BS of 20 different things they found online that they don't understand the entirety of each system, and they're just trying to make a better system without having a good understanding, then it's probably error on both ends. And that's the reason that we try to break it down to the simplest actions, because we know that the simplest actions often are right, especially if they've worked across time, across individuals, and across situations.
It's kind of getting back to like that first principle idea of let's just start with the basics, start with zero, right? Let's know the laws, let's know how everything works, and then we'll go from there. We'll build from there, build from the ground up. And I like that. So number 6 or number 2, depending on how you want to call it, the principle of least resistance. Systems that tend to follow the path of least resistance to reach equilibrium. And equilibrium, that would be considered like balance, right? Or peace. Or what would you consider that?
Balance. I think balance is the perfect word that you use there.
Okay.
And what I really want for both of the first 2 laws we just talked about in this podcast is for our listeners just to avoid making your financial strategies, your financial lives more complicated than they need to be. I know that if you go online, everyone talks about, oh, I have this really sexy trading algorithm that does all this stuff. And they're overcomplicating something that can be made very simple. Simplicity reduces friction and ensures consistent progress. You know, I was recently reading the book 10x Your Business, and it's great to 10x your business. That sounds wonderful. But what's even better than 10x in your business is to get 1% better in your business every single day.
Yeah.
That will destroy 10x. Simplicity is often a lot easier rather than trying to, oh, how do I 10x my finances? How do I 10x my finances again? How can I get 1% better every single day? Then you have the law of compounding behind you. 1% better every single day over a lifetime is substantially better than 10xing something as often as you can, because that takes a lot of work.
It's true. And honestly, like when you go to like 10xing, you need to start small. I believe the best way to do it is through the 1%, like we just talked about, because it lets you focus on, okay, like for this podcast, right? Cool. Well, I need maybe a better camera, 1%, better lighting, 1%, better scripts, 1%, better personality, 2%. Stuff like that. And I like that better versus like, we got to fix everything right now. And then maybe in like 7 months, we'll fix everything again. It's like, no, dude, for me, that just gets it too cluttered. I'm more of a slow and steady turtle type of guy. So that works for me in my life. And you saying simplicity is key is really hopeful for me. It makes me feel very hopeful because oftentimes, I mean, like, you get bogged down with, well, I need to be investing for my future and saving for now and emergency funds and, health insurance and HSAs and dental because it's not covered by, and it's a lot. And simplicity is key. It's focusing on one thing at a time. Today, we're going to focus on the health insurance. Tomorrow, we're going to focus on the dental. And I love that, right?
Yeah. And maybe if we were AI systems that could process raw data faster than other things, then we could go ahead and do multiple things. But we are human. We are in these meat sacks, or like we're biological entities that are doing these things. And at the end of the day, if things become too complex, your brain will just shut it down. And I think that's where a lot of our culture is right now. They think about money and it becomes this big, scary concept of all these things. And rather than how can I get 1% better in my money, they look at Jeff Bezos, they look at Elon Musk, they look at somebody that they quote is quote unquote good with money, and they put where they are right now against that person, and they realize that they don't stack up. So then they decide, I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
Rather than if you got 1% better and you're only beating yourself every day, well, now you're just taking one step, rather than I have a mile-long jump that I have to make. If you put me in front of like a mile-long jump, you say, jump that. There's no way in hell I'm going to do that. But if you say, hey, I need you to walk a mile, okay, I know how to do that. One foot in front of the other.
Yeah, and it's so dangerous to compare yourself to other people. I would caution against it in the most extreme way I can, right? Especially like if you're comparing yourself to Elon Musk. Like Elon Musk is great at literally risking it all. Like just making a bunch of money and then be like, you know what? I'm putting it all on black. I'm putting it all on red, right? Just risking it all.
But he also bets on himself. Like
exactly.
He's not betting on just like the odds. He's betting on himself.
Yeah, because he knows himself. It's a whole thing. Very interesting guy, but I love the idea of simplicity is key. I believe that, and Chris and I both believe this, but life is to be lived. You shouldn't be spending every day worrying about your finances, looking at your finances, and just like getting stressed out by it. I love the idea of the automation, and thank God we're in a world in a time period where we can automate things. Can you imagine what life would be like? I mean, I know your job would be a lot crazier going back. I mean, even 20 or 30 years, a totally different ballgame.
Yep. Yeah, it was. And thank goodness that we have the systems we have now. And yes, things are harder than they've ever have been. And we have systems to make it easier than they ever have been. So both things are true simultaneously, which actually brings us to point number 7. Point number 7, our principle, was something that I wasn't going to talk about. But if you listen to our Monday podcast, we ended up going into quantum physics for a while, which I didn't expect to go into quantum physics. But Dominic asked a question that led me to that point. So I thought in this one, let's go ahead and bring it in. So here's one of the principles that we didn't expect to talk about. And this is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. This is physics. This is modern day physics, quantum physics, theoretical physics. In quantum physics, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle says that we, or you as an individual, no one actually, can precisely know both the position and the momentum of a particle at the same time. Now, I understand that no one understands what I'm saying with that. So let me go ahead and apply it to finances, because understanding quantum physics is something I don't fully understand, and I've been studying it for years. Again, I don't understand the math, but I can definitely understand the principles behind it. You cannot perfectly predict both the short and long-term outcomes of any financial decision. So if you focus on what you can control, like consistent savings, rather than trying to time the market or predict every future expense. This principle of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle reminds me of what the Stoics taught us. Focus on what you can control, because it's impossible for us to know both the position and the momentum of any particle. The moment that we do, we change its action.
I love what you said right there. Focus on what you can control. Too often times we get bogged down with the information, especially, I mean, watching the news, going on TikTok, stuff like that. You're focusing on things that you have zero control over. And I think that's why a lot of us feel so out of control. I feel like the world is what it is and we can't do anything about it. It's like yes and no. Focus on what you can control and control it to the best of your ability and operate to the best of your ability. Especially with that mindset and that framework of simplicity is key. I mean, those two things alone, those two little nuggets, you can go very far with those two very, very powerful nuggets. So I'm trying to figure out what the best way to kind of get out of your own way is. Because I know a lot of us get in our own head, get in our own way. Do you have a method of I know we've heard of different methods, maybe from Mel Robbins, the 3-second rule where 1, 2, 3, and you have to go, right? You have to just do it. I don't know if that so much applies here, but do you have a strategy for kind of decluttering your systems and really getting back to simplicity?
Oh, I wish I did. Unfortunately, I struggle with so much anxiety that often my systems overcomplicate themselves needlessly. And I recognize that. That's the reason I have to figure out all of these weird ways to figure it out. So I always go back to doing my small actions every day, going back to my systems, going back to my processes, waking up early. Obviously you don't have to cold plunge, but for me, doing my cold plunge, going to jiu-jitsu, working on myself first, and then everything else follows from there. Again, every single day, I have 6 tasks that I know if I complete these 6 tasks that were assigned to me the night prior by myself, that if I get those done, I'll know it's a good day. So I just work at it one thing at a time. And to go back to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, this quantum physics, it's something I've been really thinking on a lot more, in that the nature of human nature is that things are always binary. It's either good or it's bad. It's 0 or it's 1. It's left or it's right. It's yes or it's no. We always think in binary states. Everything is black and white. But I think we all know, and we've all heard it from grandma, from grandpa, our entire lives, that all of life are shades of gray. But our brains, our biological systems, want it to be black and white. And unfortunately, that's just not the way the world works. So when I think of quantum physics, the actual baseline of the actual code of our existence is all shades of gray. The only time that something is binary, 0 or 1, if we're talking about a qubit, is only when we observe it. Once you observe something in a quantum state, it'll decide if it's a 0 or a 1, if it's a positive or it's a negative. And the way that we can determine that is its spin, the way that it spins, if it's spinning left to right or right to left. We don't know what it's spinning until we look at it. So what that shows me, or what that tells me, is that whenever I'm thinking in the way that my brain wants to think, all black, all white, all good, all bad, that's not the nature of reality. The nature of reality is somewhere in the middle. It's gray. And only me thinking that something is all good or all bad makes it all good or bad. The same way when you observe the particle, now it focuses and becomes whatever it is that you were looking for. I understand that this is weird concepts. Quantum physics is weird. It seems to me as if that reality has consciousness to it. Consciousness is built into the nature of reality.
Mhm.
Again, if you don't know what we're talking about, you're just tuned in for a financial podcast. Sorry, we're going this way, but this is the nature of reality to our current understandings as humans.
100%. And could you apply that to finance so that we can kind of better understand it a little bit more?
I would say that quantum physics probably doesn't apply super well to finance, but what it does teach us is when you were thinking that doing this is good or doing this is bad when it comes to finances, that's not really true. It's good and bad simultaneously, depending on what the outcome is that we don't know the future of. So rather than chasing short-term gains, rather than trying to beat the market, what I would say is focus on your steady wealth building and diversification over time. Too many people, they get so hyper-focused on chasing the hot stock, doing whatever it is to be quote unquote good with money so that they can go and brag online. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is focusing on your wealth building journey, focusing on how much money you're making, focusing on how much money you're spending, and then investing the money in a sound system that you know is going to work out with a high degree of reasonable accuracy. Again, all of investing is gambling. You are gambling that the future will be better than today. If you don't believe that the future will be better than today, then why are you investing? By definition, you should be buying a bunker, bullets, cans of food. Very different type of investing. And maybe you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. We can't know till we get there. We can't know till we actually observe. And then that makes the reality the way that it is. Quantum physics, this Heisenberg uncertainty principle, applies to pretty much all things. So that's where I begin to believe that it's probably true. But the biggest thing I can tell people to do is focus on what you can control, realize that you can't know if it's good or bad, but thinking makes it so. The nature of reality is gray. The nature of reality is not binary. It's somewhere in the middle.
I say we move on to number 8. That one's one of those ones where I'm going to have to sit and ponder and really soak it in, right? That it hit the surface level and like concrete, like it just didn't soak it up. It didn't soak it up as well as some of the other ones. But I know with time and a repeat, that one will start to make more sense as the more you think on it. So I hope I'm not alone in that. And I know this is the first time for me.
To be fair, even theoretical physicists don't understand theoretical physics.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work in our brains. Like it's so counterintuitive. If like we're talking about a 4-dimensional object in a 3-dimensional space, we can't your brain can't conceive of it. Nope.
Yeah.
It can't.
Yeah. So
and that's okay.
Yeah, it's totally okay, right? Today's episode was not about making you feel dumb, listener. Not about that at all. But it's important to know that there's more to learn. And sometimes feeling dumb is a great thing. I love feeling dumb. It means that I have more to learn in this area. And that's fun. That's exciting for me because I love to learn. So moving on to our next one, number 8.
Number 8, this is something that maybe some people have heard a little bit more about. And it's a bit more simplistic than is theoretical physics. This is Newton's first law, the law of inertia. And maybe people have heard of this. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. So objects in motion stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force.
Interesting. First thing that comes to mind is someone who goes to the gym consistently. Now, over time, when they get up there in their age, 60s, 70s, 80s, even higher, if they continue, not necessarily a rigorous, full body, workout, hitting squats for 225, maybe not that crazy, but as long as they keep active, they'll continue being active. And that's kind of the first thing that came to mind. I'm wondering what you guys thought was the first thing that came into your mind. Maybe there was a movie or there's something that popped in, a pop culture reference, but what's kind of the first thing that pops into your mind, Chris, when you hear about this law?
When I think of the law of inertia, I also go to fitness. I think a lot about Dr. Peter Tia, and he talks about, longevity. Longevity is his whole thing. How do we keep going? And something that took me a long time to realize in fitness is it's not about how hard you work in one day. It's about how much you can work over the course of many days. So what he always talks about is that as young people, as young men especially, we always feel like I need to go into the gym. I basically need to go so hard that I hurt myself. Like, and to the point that I can barely walk out of the gym. Yeah. That's how I know that I did good. but you can go into the gym and go as hard as you possibly can. The guy that goes to the gym 7 days a week and just does a little bit of work is going to outpace you. This is the same concept of, I'm not going to brush my teeth for 364 days, but on one day, I'm just going to go super hard and brush my teeth crazy for 24 full hours. Consistent effort is substantially more than one time. The law of inertia also shows us that it's going to be easier to stick with that habit. It's easier to stick with the habit if I know every morning when I'm in the shower, I brush my teeth. Every evening before I get into bed, I brush my teeth. That system is done. Inertia is already done for me. Unless an outside force acts upon me, like maybe I don't have time to take a shower, or maybe I don't sleep in my own house that night, then inertia works against me. And I have to go ahead and put conscious effort into it to get my teeth brushed. Now imagine that across your finances, imagine that across your entire life. It's the exact same principle, a principle of a physical law of the universe that works with us. It's a boulder rolling down a hill. It will continue to work. The only thing that slows the boulder down is friction. Friction of what the boulder is rolling on.
Like that one. That's gonna be my favorite one. That's my favorite one so far. It's the easiest one to understand. Newton's first law, super easy. I can get that one, and I think most people can really equate that to finance and how compound interest is a great example of this as well, in a way.
Yeah, no, it 100% is. So just to apply it to finance, I know that you get it, but just to make sure our listeners really understand is once you establish a positive financial habit, like saving or investing, they tend to just keep going. But getting started often requires that initial push. Remember that the law of inertia says that objects in motion tend to stay in motion, but objects at rest tend to stay at rest. So in order to get that ball moving, that's why we always say start soon, start often, just freaking start. I don't care if your savings rate is 0.5%, 0.3%. I don't care if you're making $10,000 and you're saving just $1. Ideally, I want you to go up, but I want you to do that savings rate because what do most people do in life? Oh, when I get that next promotion. Oh, when I get more money. When I have more money, then I will start saving. But every time along the way, every time they've made more money, their lifestyle inflated to the exact amount of money that they're now making, if not more. You need to start to work these things in. This is the law of inertia working against you. You have to get a push to start that ball rolling. And once you start, it makes it easier. It's easier to start to move from 1% savings rate to 3% savings rate than it is to go from 0% savings rate to 1% savings rate. You need to start somewhere. So an example would be setting up an automated savings plan, creating financial momentum. That's hard to stop.
And there's something so beautiful about that momentum. Once you start, push that little snowball down the hill, down the mountain. I mean, you look back down a couple of years later, it's like, wow, this is a massive snowball that's continuing to roll down a mountain. And I don't think that's very, people don't talk about that. People don't talk about the momentum and how exciting that is. It's like, it's really hard to start sometimes. But once you start and you get the momentum going, you're on autopilot, essentially. Until something comes by and wrecks it.
And I think that's the cool part, right? Is objects in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. So once you get this process started, once the snowball starts going, it's easy.
Yeah.
Like you're not having to do anything. The system is already working. It's staying in motion already. The savings are happening. Whatever's going on, whatever system you set up is already happening until an outside force comes in and acts upon it to make it stop. And of course, life is full of outside forces. That is the nature of reality, that there's always going to be constant change. And we have to be ready for that. And that's okay. But if we have a system that's in place, that's continuing to go, when we hit against that wall, when an outside force does work against it, it's going to take an extraordinary outside force to stop a huge amount of momentum. But if you have no motion, and now you have an outside force trying to stop you, it's pretty easy.
Yeah. You ever try and stop a stopped car? It's pretty easy. Really easy. You ever try to stop a moving car? That sucks. That's not great. It's not easy, especially if it's going real fast. So it's a little visual for you. So that was number.
I think that's a perfect example. Yeah, I think that's a perfect example.
And don't just stay moving on your finances. Stay moving in every area of your life, your knowledge, your reading, testing your brain, pushing yourself, your health, your wealth, your relationships, right? Keep them going, you know? So that was that was our number 8, but that was law of inertia, Newton's first law. So there we
Newton's
go.
first law, yes.
Perfect. So moving on to number 9.
Number 9, we're going to be talking more about our boy Newton and his third law of motion. Newton's third law of motion is something that everyone has heard before. They may not know it's his third law, but it's every action, or for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So before I talk about how this could be applied to finance, can you think of a way that every action has an equal and opposite reaction might apply to finances or into life in general?
I'm glad you said in life in general, because the first thing that came into mind was like, well, I'm in line at the gas station. I punch the guy in front of me. He punches me back. That's equal and opposite reaction. It makes sense. It's a logical response. But as far as finance, a wise Benjamin Franklin always said, a penny saved is a penny earned. And, I save a little bit today, I have a little bit more tomorrow. Would that be considered Newton's third law?
Yes, that is exactly it. Every financial action you take, whether it's saving, spending, investing, or even borrowing money, has consequences. It has an equal reaction or opposite. It has an equal and opposite reaction. Both equal and opposite, not or, both equal and opposite reaction. So you want to make sure that your decisions align with your financial goals to avoid undesirable outcomes. But most people don't even know what their goals are. They're just kind of moving through life, meandering, hoping that things work out. And if you continue to do that, we don't know where your motion is taking you. If you're just kind of going off of the whims of your feelings, off of the whims of the weather, off the whims of, I don't know, whatever way the wind is blowing, it's going to be very hard to set up a life that you can move towards because you don't have goals. You don't know where you're going. And maybe if you're trying to tell me like, oh, well, the unaimed arrow never misses, Chris, so I'm on the right path, that works for you. And I'm going to say nothing is good or bad. I'm only going to ask you, is whatever life you're living, is it serving you? Is it taking you to be the person that you want to be? If it is, great. You can shut me off right now. If it isn't, then we need to make a change.
And that's such a difficult question too. It's like, what is the life you want to live? And what is that based in? And where did you conjure up that image? Is it something you saw on social media? Is it something that, well, I meditated and it came to me, right? And I find that oftentimes what we want isn't truly what we want. And I'm sure you working with a lot of clients and people setting goals. I mean, you're literally in the future building, I guess, sector. People might come to you and be like, I want to have X amount by X time. This is why. It's like, all right, are you sure? Like, what's the reason? Like, I want to make $100,000 a month. It's like, okay, why? Why do you need $100,000 a month? Right? I don't know. I find that as long as you know yourself, life gets a lot easier. But it's a difficult ask.
I think it's true. I mean, Sun Tzu says, know thyself. Like that's the first most important thing that you can do in war. And war is just, hopefully no one finds himself in war, but war really is the precipice of like human experience. It's all of the feelings. It's everything happening simultaneously. It's hell. It's life and death all personified into an event. It's all of these things and so much more. So when I think about these Newton's third law, because we are kind of going outside of it, but when I go back to Newton's third law, every decision, whether they be spending, investing, borrowing, has consequences. So you need to know yourself. You need to think carefully about how your actions today align with your long-term goals. Same with if you're in a war. Every action that you take has consequences. So for our governments, for people, when you send people off to war, everything that we do has consequences. And I think that it's hard for people to realize those consequences because you don't see them until they happen. They're not real until they're done. But every action that you've taken up until that point gets you the outcome that you were always going to have. So from a financial standpoint, if you choose to borrow excessively, the opposite reaction is that it's going to increase financial strain. Alternatively, if you have a consistent savings and investing strategy, the opposite reaction is that it's going to lead to long-term financial freedom. Know where you're going and try to set that path, understanding that everything that you do has an equal and opposite reaction. So sometimes you have to put in hard work now to make it be easier later. Because if I decide I'm not going to put in any work now, I'm not going to do anything, it's just going to be easy, I'm just going to play my life on autopilot and just let other things happen to me. Well, the equal and opposite reaction is that in the future, I'm going to have to work extremely hard to make it up for that. But if I work hard now, if I do all these things, the equal and opposite reaction is in the future, I don't have to work as hard because I put in the work at the get-go. These are the physics of life, and it applies to all things.
And that's really the way to get anywhere in life, isn't it? Do the hard thing now so tomorrow will be easier.
Yesterday, I was talking with my friend, and we were talking about habits. How do you wake up early? How do you do these things? Because we know what it's like. You wake up, you set an alarm the night before saying, hey, I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever time. And then that alarm goes off. Underneath the covers are really, really nice. It's kind of cold outside. You know, last night the dog was barking, so it's hard to go to sleep. You have every single excuse in the world, and they're all valid. Every single thing is valid that you're thinking through there. And I told my friend, the thing that I always try to remind myself is, remember tomorrow. Remember how you're going to feel about yourself tomorrow. It doesn't make it easier to get out of bed. It still sucks to get out of bed. It still sucks to go on a bike ride at 4 a.m. in the morning in Arizona right now when it's cold as hell in the morning. It's none of it's easy. But if you remember tomorrow, if you remember the person that you want to be, it helps to get you out of the bed. It helps to break that inertia because it does take consistent work. But all the work that you put in now is less work that future you has to deal with. Saving right now, taking care of your physical body right now, eating right now is going to set it up for easier you. You have to learn to love yourself in the future you, just as much as you love experiencing you right now. Because it's the same person, just in different times and space.
Yeah. Could you reiterate, or could you say that last part again? Just, I want it to really soak in with the viewer. Because really, what you're saying is it's an act of love, self-love, for yourself and others. That you remember tomorrow, so that today is hard, but tomorrow is easier. Not just for you, but for everyone around you. And really, that's kind of like what it's like being a man, a real man, right? You do what's hard so your family can have it easy.
Yeah. You know, I mean, there's so many different philosophies, all religion, all of thought process comes back down to all things in life is just love. Like, it's all love, man. And like, you hear somebody say that, and I do the exact same thing. I have like almost a visceral like repulsion of like, what do you mean it's all love, man? Like, that sounds really stupid. But when you meditate on it and you think about it a little bit more, you realize like, oh my God, they were right. And I couldn't see it. And maybe you have to define these words. Like, all in life is love. Well, first you have to define like, what is all of life? What does that constitute as? And then we have to define the word love. So if you put a gun in my head, like, what does love mean? It means subjugating your ego, subjugating yourself, and wanting what's best for other people, wanting what's best for whoever you love, whether that be with you, without you, you just want what's best for them, irregardless of what is for you. So I think as you go through life, if you realize that if you begin to love what is best for other people, but more importantly, or maybe the first step is to love yourself. If I love future me, I'm going to do whatever is best for future me, even if that means right now, or that I have to suffer because I love that person. And the crazy thing is when you apply this to yourself, it's the same person. You're just loving a different version of you in a different time, in a different place. But it's that love of, this is what I want for you. And I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to subjugate my ego, what I want right now, because I love you. It's the same thing in marriage. If you can't apply this to yourself, apply it to your spouse. Apply it to your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your dog. It's the exact same concept of wanting what's best for them, even if it hurts you. even if it means work for you, you're willing to do it because that is what true love is, in my definition. And if you disagree with me, that's cool. Leave it in the comments. Let me know that I'm wrong. That's okay. Dominic, did I trigger a thought?
Honestly, I was just gonna say, wow, I love that. Just just as ironically as possible. Um, no, I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on, and I connect with that a lot. I really connected with that a lot. You know, I was thinking about my own self. It's like, well, why do I get up early? Why do I go to work? Why do I do all these things? And it's love. And it's weird. It's weird because get up, go to work, you know, do your job. You know, I just do it. It's not, oh, today I'm going to be loving and I'm going to go to work to provide for my family. It's like, no, I do it. I just do it. And it's just something I do. And I wonder how we can have more actions like that. Oh, I just go to the gym and I work out. It's an act of self-love into the love of my people, right? So that I can be better for them. And I wonder what do you think, Chris? Do you think it's a more of a, the more you do it, the more it just is?
Well, let's go back to the law of inertia.
Mm-hmm.
The more you start to take that path, the more you put upon it to work harder, the easier it becomes. And if you remember that the force you're applying is from a good place, from a place of love, you have a lot more strength. You have the power to persist through getting that ball rolling. Because sometimes it's harder and harder, and then eventually it becomes not something that you do, it becomes a part of you. You know, I don't think about going to the gym. I don't think about having to go to jiu-jitsu. I just do it. It is me. It's part of my identity. It's not something that I have to do. It's something that I do. It just is.
It just is. And it's like you said, it's not something I have to. It's something it calls to me. It's something you enjoy it. You enjoy working out. You enjoy the jiu-jitsu. It calls to you.
Maybe not but not even in the moment. In the moment, like there are moments that I hate it, but I know that future me, remember tomorrow, future me will be proud of what I did today. I had to go through all this shit. I had to put myself in a cold plunge. I had to do all these things, not for me right now, because experiencing me is suffering, having to go through that. But because I want future me to be happy, I have to go through those things. Because I know myself, and I know if I don't do those things, I will not be happy. I will feel like a piece of shit. I will feel sad. I will feel like I wasted my day, my life, my whatever. And I'm not saying that's right. If you're like me and you have a brain like mine that works like mine, I'm sorry. Because I know what that's like. So rather than sitting here and complaining and saying like, oh, my brain's broken, I'm sad all the time, blah, 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 blah. All these things are true. And what are you going to do about it? You're going to come to a place of love and understanding that this is the way that I work. I wish that I could change. I am working on changing. And until that happens, I'm going to try to be the best person that I can be for me. And then that for me extends out to all other people. But that self-love for me is the hardest thing. But for other people, maybe it's the easiest thing. And everyone has different things that are easier and hard for them. And that's cool. That's how we all learn from one another.
There's definitely levels to it. There's definitely levels to it. So I say we move on to our 10th and final one. I'm going to let you pronounce this one because I'm going to butcher it. I'm definitely going to butcher it. So take the reins, Chris. It's all yours.
So this isn't actually from physics. It's from philosophy. But again, it works across all things. And this is Occam's razor. In philosophy, often the simplest explanation is often the correct one. So if I'm when I say that, what do you think of?
The simplest explanation is often the correct one. First thing that kind of comes to mind is when a little kid asks, you know, why can I have this? Right? Maybe can I have a cookie? Right? To a mother or father. And the mother or father says, no, you can't have this cookie. Right? 10:30 at night. You're already supposed to be in bed. Right? You're going to be bouncing off the walls. Right? It's the simplest answer. That's kind of the first thing that came to mind. But in regards to a finance finance realm. I'm not too sure. I'm going to have to think on that one. Do you have an example for us?
Well, let me tell you a story about Copernicus.
Okay.
So Copernicus was one of the first. He was an astronomer, and this is back in during the church, where the church believed that we had a heliocentric universe.
Yeah.
Basically meaning that all planets, all of existence revolved around Earth. Because from us, each one of us, we're so precious, we're so special, we can only perceive the universe through our own eyes. And since we do that, we all believe that we are the center of the universe. So having this idea of a geocentric universe meant that all planets, all things revolved around us. And if you map the stars, if you map the planets and how they move, obviously they had telescopes a little bit. They didn't have all of the science that we do, but they were able to watch the stars move around us. They were able to see these stars go on their path, and the path was very consistent. Then eventually they saw these other things that were brighter than stars, and they seemed to move in circles, like spirals through the sky. And everyone theorized that, okay, so in order for me to have other planets that are around in the solar system, because we knew the sun was real, we knew the moon was there, we knew that there were other celestial bodies. In order to explain these other planets, you have to make this crazy contraption where it puts the Earth in the center of the universe, then it puts planets going around the Earth, and in order to get that little wobble where they're spinning, you have to have them also spinning. So they're spinning around us that are spinning around themselves. That's how they're able to get a wobble. It wasn't until Copernicus went against the role of the Vatican Church and said, I don't think that Earth is the center of the universe. I believe that the sun is the center of the universe. And if the sun is the center of the universe and we are simply going around the sun, then all of these planets spinning around their own axes, spinning around us, goes away. The simplest answer became the right answer. The simplest answer is we're just revolving around the sun. But it was the hardest answer for people to understand. So when it comes to finance, when making financial decisions, keeping things as simple as possible, not overcomplicating your strategy, will help you achieve your financial goal. It comes back to the first two laws we talked about. Simplicity is key. Simplicity dictates all things, because in a system that is complex, it will always move towards entropy. It will always move to disorder. So if we have the simplest answer to be successful, whatever life gets you, you will get there. What I have brought that down to in my life is 1% better. That's the simplest way that I have done that for me. 1% better.
Okay. And maybe the viewer, you guys can think of something in your own life that you can equate that to as well. I do like the 1% better strategy, though. It's simple, and I like it. And then simplicity is key. We know that from today's episode.
And I think just from a financial standpoint, like financial strategies, if you take one thing away from today, financial strategies do not need to be overly complex. Simplicity and clarity, I truly believe, leads to better results. So I think that too many people, what I hope is that our listeners, rather than getting lost in complicated investment schemes, maybe they'll realize that sometimes the simplest approach, like just investing in a diversified index fund, automating their savings, trying to grow how much money they're bringing in, is the best path to financial success. But constantly going in between scheme after scheme after scheme that are more and more complex, if you keep on doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result, the issue is you.
It kind of reminded me when you were talking there, I was writing something down, and it's kind of like running it through a filter, running it through a test, right? If your strategy doesn't fit the test, maybe you need a new strategy, right? And the filter is, if you can't explain it to a child and they don't understand it, then it's probably not a great strategy. Is that too much? Is that too little? What do you think? Depends on the child. I mean, if a little Einstein, I mean, you're like, not complex enough, but
it would depend on, I think it would depend on the child a little bit, but
a little bit.
Yeah, I think, again, it comes back to simplicity is key. And the nice thing about a child is that you have to bring it down to a level that the basic people can understand. So even for me, when obviously this is a podcast where I'm trying to teach you. And I think last podcast, there was something where you're like, I don't understand this well enough. Like, and I couldn't explain it to you. That isn't a failure on your part, Dominic. That isn't a failure on our listener's standpoint. That's a failure on me. If I don't understand it well enough, then I can't simply say it easy enough, then that means that I need to work on it, that I need to have a better understanding so that I can teach it better. Same thing with jiu-jitsu. If I'm trying to teach a move to somebody that I don't fundamentally understand the mechanics of, it's going to be very difficult for me to teach somebody effectively. So we go through life and we try to figure those things out. What are you not good at? What are you good at? How can I get better? Yes, for myself right now, but also for future me and for everything else. That love aspect kind of comes back. But yeah, I think explaining it to a kid, if you can explain it to a kid, then that means you understand the system well enough yourself. And that means you can stick through when it gets hard because you know it well enough.
I like that. I think that's good. I think that's solid.
Yeah, too much of personal finance is more personal than it is finance. It's more about controlling your emotions, sticking to the path, knowing that when things get hard, it's just hard right now, and not taking that suffering that you're dealing with right now and take it indefinitely into the future. It just is right now. It doesn't mean it always has to be. So our action step for this week is I want you to pick one of the principles we talked about and put it into practice. Maybe you want to automate your financial habits, like transferring just $50 a week to your savings account. This would be the principle of least action. Or maybe you simply just want to simplify your budget. Focus on 3 main categories: your needs, your wants, and your savings rate. This would be the principle of least resistance. Maybe you reflect on your recent financial decisions and you see, does that align with your goals, which would be Newton's third law? Or maybe you eliminate one unnecessary financial product or service to streamline your strategy and make it a little bit easier, like Occam's razor. Move forward 1% better every day. If 1% better every day sounds too hard, let's break it down into 1% better every week. Just take action. That's all I ask for. I get nothing. I literally get nothing if you take action. If you make your life better, I get nothing. And in truth, I get everything because we move in a better place to a better society. But it takes one step. Everybody needs to do it. Everyone needs to be a part of change. You can't just sit on the sideline and complain. You have to do something.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This was a deep one. This was a 2-parter. So if you did, make sure to give it a like, give it a 5-star rating if you are listening on one of the many podcast platforms that we happen to be on. Or if you are on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe, see our beautiful faces. And make sure to tell a friend about today's episode. Whether it's today's episode or it's a different episode that you enjoyed, make sure to share the podcast, not just for me, but for you as well. Because when friends talk about finance, the world gets a little bit better, a little bit greener. So, with that being said, hope you take what we've learned today and actually use it. And we will see you on Monday's episode. On Friday's episode, actually. Today's Monday. It's been a heck of a day. Quantum physics, baby. Anyway, I'm Dom. He's Chris, and we'll see you in the next one.
Later.
Peace.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.